Hello and welcome back, USD, to your favorite sports talk radio show, Bix and K. My man K here is back in the studio after a week of absence. We will be with you guys here from 2:30 to 4 p.m. Pacific time, as usual. And we got a special show for you guys today. As most of you know, K and I both love the NFL draft. And after we give you guys a little bit of the news, a little bit of the important stuff that's gone on this week, the last hour of our show is going to be entirely based around our NFL mock drafts because, unfortunately, Kay will be absent again next week. He won't be with us. He's off on another trip, so he won't get to see you guys again before the NFL draft takes place. So we just want to make sure we get our favorite show of the year in. But again, that'll start in a little bit. And with that, Kay, let's talk some NBA playoffs.
Let's do it. Yeah, thank you so much for tuning in, guys. I am back. I wasn't here last week. I did hear that Bix had a great solo show, so that was awesome.
I tried.
Yeah, but let's get into another favorite time, our favorite sports event of the year for me, the NBA playoffs. It's so great. You know, we have like 4 meaningful games a day. It's always a fun time. The first series I want to talk about is one of the only ones that has 2 games right now in the books, and that is the Cleveland Cavaliers and Indiana Pacers. Now, Bix, the first game was won by the Cleveland Cavaliers by only 1 point, and they ended up winning the second game as well. So they have a comfortable 2-0 lead. Let me ask you, do you think that the Cleveland Cavaliers are in a position to worry? Even though they have a 2-0 lead, their defense has been a little stagnant, if you will. They haven't been playing their best basketball, but I want to ask you, what are your thoughts on that series?
I mean, like you said, the Cavs do have the 2-0 series lead. I don't think that's quite representative of how the series has necessarily gone so far. The Cavs have, yes, done enough to win, but they haven't necessarily been at their best either night that they've played, quite honestly.
Right.
And you could make a strong argument that the Pacers probably should have won Game 1, and if they do, the whole series takes on a whole different dynamic. At this point, up 2-0 in the first round, it's pretty much a lock for the Cavaliers. I wouldn't be surprised if they go on to sweep the series and Pacers don't even get a game. But had things gone a little bit differently, maybe Paul George gets the last shot of Game 1, it could go in. You can't speculate too much, but a 1-1 series at this point is definitely a whole nother ball game than 2-0. The Cavs have all the momentum, and I just don't see any way that the Pacers come back.
Well, so now they're going to Indiana. That place to play is not an easy place to play. Bankers Life Fieldhouse, sorry, I was thinking of the name. 2 games there. I think they split the series there, and when they come back to Cleveland for Game 5, I think that's when Cleveland locks it in, so I'm going Cleveland in 5. Now, moving on to another fun series so far. We've only had 1 game in the books. I want to talk about the Bulls and Celtics. Of course, first thing that I want to mention is, our condolences to Isaiah Thomas for losing his sister, his 22-year-old sister, in a car accident just the night before. That's a hard thing to deal with, something that we haven't had to deal with, thank goodness. But I'm sure it's a difficult time for him and his family. Unfortunately, I am rooting for the Bulls in that series now, and the Celtics. They haven't been able to lock it in for that first game. Do you think they have any reason to worry as a team?
Yeah, this has turned into what's going to be one of the more interesting series of the first round of the NBA playoffs, in my opinion.
Uh-huh.
There were a lot of things going on in Game 1, Kay. Like you mentioned, the terrible tragedy of Isaiah Thomas losing his sister. Now, that seems to have boosted him, and he had such a wonderful game, in part almost in tribute to her. But I think overall the morale of the team took quite the blow when you look at it. Overall, and just seeing how this whole tragedy affected not only Thomas, but his teammates as well. And they struggled. They struggled out of the gate. He seemed to be the only one that could get anything going. I still think that they eventually win the series, but it's going to be closer than people thought, because Jimmy Butler is arguably the best player on the floor. People go back
That's a
and
good
forth. He and Isaiah Thomas are pretty close in my opinion. I tend to think higher of Isaiah Thomas than maybe some other people do, but I think Jimmy Butler is probably the best guy out there on the worst team. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah.
In the end, I think the Celtics recover. This series winds up going 6 or 7 games for sure, but I'm going Celtics.
Well, one thing to note is that between Rajon Rondo, Dwayne Wade, of course, Jimmy Butler, they have a lot of playoff experience, so they know how to elongate the series if need be. We have to remember the Celtics are the number 1 seed, so that I don't have any doubt in my mind that they move on from this weakened Bulls team that barely slipped in. But like you said, it'll be a fun series. Now, moving on, I want to talk, sticking with the Eastern Conference, I want to talk about what's another matchup?
How about the Bucks and the Raptors?
Yeah, the Bucks and the Raptors, right? I
Probably my favorite series of the first round.
Well, a lot of people actually did pick Milwaukee for the first game, and rightfully so. They really whooped it to Toronto in Toronto. I couldn't avoid that. But I think that was a really fun game to watch because not many people expected an all-out victory like they had, especially with such a young team with a young coach. I mean, Jason Kidd does not have any playoff experience. Antetokounmpo came out and played like the MVP he's going to be in the future. Really impressed me. I think they gained a lot of fans. But the number 1 player for that team, in my opinion, was Jonathan Ogden. Probably the Rookie of the Year this year. He came out, had a great game, and I think that's going to be a big difference maker.
Yeah, this was a great game, like you mentioned, for the Bucks to get national exposure because everyone knows about the Greek Freak and the mystique surrounding him and what he can do. Obviously, he's a future MVP. But besides Jabari Parker, who's injured and out for the season, I don't know if there are too many people out there not from Milwaukee that can name any other player on that team.
Yes.
So for them to get national exposure, to get that first victory in Toronto, which was huge for them, is great. And you just wonder how far they can take that in this series. I'm tempted to pick them to win. Now, I know it's going to be tough. The Raptors will bounce back. They will get their wins. But I think this series, again, much like the Celtics and the Bulls, will be better than people expect. And I'm thinking maybe 7 games.
Milwaukee in 7.
Milwaukee in 7.
That's not a bad pick. I was actually leaning that way as well. And especially because I think they'll split the series at home. I think Toronto will split the series at home. And then Milwaukee could potentially bounce back and get a 3-1 lead on them when they come back to Milwaukee, or when they come to Milwaukee.
The biggest games in that series will be when Milwaukee goes home for games 3 and 4.
Yeah, and
depending on what they do there, we'll know a little bit more about their chances. But even if they can take 1 game at home, and you potentially look at the series going to 2-2, that's huge for them, and would put them still in a good position to win.
And then Game 5, let's say Toronto just from home court advantage wins that one. They're back in Milwaukee for Game 6, win that one, go to Game 7. Moving on to the Wizards and the Hawks. The last series, potentially, I would say the most boring series for a lot of NBA fans.
The most boring series, not only in the Eastern Conference, but in the entire playoffs.
Yeah. I think the reason for that is, the Wizards kind of lost their fun attitude. The Wizards are a good team, but they're reliant on kind of these bigs to, for John Wall to dish out an assist in the paint, just get a simple layup. Not great basketball to watch, especially in this day and age. They don't really have that many shooters on the outside comparatively. And, of course, the Hawks are the Hawks. I think Atlanta is always going to be a boring team. Dwight Howard's not even a big difference maker for them.
And you ask the casual fan to name players in this matchup, you probably get John Wall, and maybe you get Dwight Howard. If people are aware that he plays for the Hawks.
Right. He's bounced back so much.
Obviously, if you talk to NBA fans that follow the game religiously and whatnot, they'll know. But for most people, there's no other reason besides John Wall to watch this series because it's just boring. You don't know any of the players. Mm-hmm. They don't play an exciting brand of basketball. Both teams are built around their defense. So,
and what's funny is that, typically Atlanta and Washington are not really small markets. If you think of other sports, you have the Braves, the Nationals, you have the Falcons, the Redskins. Not really small markets, but when it comes to the NBA, the Wizards and the Hawks are not that high up on in terms of marketable teams, in terms of big markets. It's not a New York Knicks, even though they suck. It's not that brand. So I think that's another important factor. So that's the Eastern Conference. We're going to have coverage of the NBA playoffs going forward.
Before we move on to the Western Conference, though, who you got moving on? Wizards, Hawks.
I'm going to have to stick with the Wizards. They're going to be favored in every game they play. Atlanta just doesn't have enough this year to move on. If they do, I'll be surprised. I think it'll be competitive, but I got the Wizards in this one.
I'm agreeing with you. I don't think there's any way the Hawks stop them.
So the consensus four that we have are Milwaukee, Cleveland, and then we have the Celtics. You have the Celtics,
yep.
And the Wizards. Okay. Now moving on to the Western Conference, the more exciting Western Conference in the NBA. Let's stick with number 1 and number 8, Golden State and Portland. It's your team.
It's not going to surprise you. Warriors in 4.
Warriors in 4. Yeah,
it's a sweep.
I hope that the Trailblazers get one game because I just love that backcourt. I love C.J. McCollum, love Dame Lillard. I love the story that they hold together.
And also something about this series that's unique, I think, to basketball. I heard this being discussed on Colin Cowherd's show the other day. Is you in this series for however many games it goes, even if it's a sweep, for 4 games. Yeah. You have possibly 5 of the best offensive players on the planet playing in one building.
Yep. And then if you bring in, even their bench into the question, Iguodala is definitely, I would say, top 25 player in the league.
Absolutely.
Consider C.J. McCollum.
But just those top 5, you got Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Kevin Durant, C.J. McCollum, and Damian Lillard.
Yeah, and then. Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's the most exciting brand of basketball because they have great shooters. Both teams on the outside. They're both, I would say, backcourt driven. It's not like anybody can name either center if you're a casual fan. And then you also have, obviously Kevin Durant, and then you have a lot of people like the Trailblazers because they're a fun team to root for. They're exciting.
And even if this does end in a sweep or 5 games or the series doesn't go very long, it still probably turns out to be one of the more exciting series of the first round just because both teams play with so much energy and they play quickly and they like to shoot and their backcourts dominate the game like you mentioned. So kind of unique thing about the NBA that people sometimes overlook.
And of the playoffs, the NBA playoffs as a whole. But you're going to go Warriors in 4?
Yep.
I'm going to give Portland 1 game at home at the Rose Garden. I'm going to go Warriors in 5, but it'll still be a fun matchup to watch overall. Moving on to probably the most lopsided series right now, the Spurs and the Grizzlies. Take that for data.
Yeah. For those of you unaware, Grizzlies coach David Fizdale, who actually graduated from the University of San Diego.
He's a communications major.
Shout out to Coach Fizdale. He went on a little bit of a rant after Game 2 of this series, saying that the refs basically blew it and didn't even let his team compete in Game 2. They didn't give him a chance, and really, he's probably right.
Yeah.
He brought up a lot of the statistics. The refs were not great in Game 2. Regardless, this series was never going to be close. The Spurs are too good. Whether they get every foul called for them or not, they're going to win the game.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is the one series I will have a complete sweep in. I think the Spurs take it. Memphis, I've been to 4 or 5 Memphis games, and I think it's a fun place to play. But it doesn't match the competitive arena-ness of maybe the AT&T Center or maybe Oracle, for example. It's not the most competitive place to play, so I think the Spurs can get 2 victories there and sweep them. The Spurs look really good, though. I think your Warriors should be worried because as a casual NBA fan, I'm really rooting for the Warriors and the Cavs because I want that finals. I'm Cavs overall, but I really want that. And I think if the Warriors somehow get knocked out in the shock of the Western Conference Finals, it will be to the Spurs, and a lot of people will be disappointed. The Spurs look really good.
It's set up for a good series
Yeah.
down the line, absolutely. But both teams have got to get there first.
That's right. Moving on to...
But I am going with you, though. Spurs in
Spurs
four
in four.
over the Grizzlies.
There you go. Moving on to another really, what a lot of people thought was going to be more competitive matchup, a fun matchup. Rockets and Thunder, the two MVP candidates playing head-to-head against each other at the point position. Very lopsided in the first game. I think the second game is tomorrow. What are your thoughts on that series?
Again, it's interesting because there are not many matchups in this first round of the NBA playoffs that are just going to be okay. They're either going to be horribly lopsided,
Yeah.
or they're going to be pretty close. The one exception to the rule, I think, that we talked about is maybe the Warriors and the Blazers, if the Blazers manage to take a game or two.
Yeah.
But, again, I don't see the Thunder winning more than a game in this series. The Rockets are just too good. James Harden is too good. He makes his teammates around him better, and it's just not going to happen for Russell Westbrook, and all the more reason why Harden should be the league MVP this year. I don't like talking about the MVP race because it's so overdone,
Yeah.
but...
Well, here's my thing. I don't want to get on a tangent for that. I understand what you're saying, but if you define most valuable player, first of all, in my opinion, most valuable player is always LeBron. But second, if you take Westbrook off that team, they are a lottery team by far. They're like a 12-win team. I think if you take Harden off that team, sure, they might scratch into the playoffs. They won't be as good. But the reason that team is so good is Mike D'Antoni's offense, some of their shooters on the outside, Gordon coming off the bench. So I think in terms of most valuable player, Westbrook wins it this year. But I understand your point.
I would really hate to see Russell Westbrook win the MVP again.
He will.
It's a discussion for another time,
Sure.
but James Harden all the way. I agree LeBron should be in that conversation every year, but this year particularly, James Harden is my pick. And I think he leads the Rockets to a sweep. A third sweep
okay.
of the first round.
No, he's not going to get a sweep. I think I'm going to go Rockets in 5. If they stretch it to 6, which is a possibility with Russell, that'll be a lot of fun. But I think it's Rockets in 5. They'll get one. I mean, the Chesapeake Energy Arena is like one of the best places to play if you're a home team guy. Moving on to the Clippers and Jazz. Another interesting matchup. They play another matchup game tonight in the Staples Center. I was at the Staples Center very recently for a Lakers game, and I will tell you, everyone there is feeling the Clippers.
I don't know why, because they're not going to win the series.
Really? Okay, hot take. They are favored to win the series.
They are favored to win the series, but I see Utah as the better team overall. And the Clippers have had the Jazz's number throughout the season. Mm-hmm. They bested them in the regular season. But I just think Utah is poised to play better this time around, and you give them a couple games to figure things out, get the tactics right, and hopefully get Rudy Gobert back later in the series. Don't know if that's going to happen. He's been ruled out for Game 2, absolutely. So we'll have to wait and see about him. But either way, they did it without him after he got hurt, and I think the Jazz wind up winning the series in 6.
Okay, that'll be a fun matchup. I am going to go with the Clippers. And what's interesting about the Jazz is that they represent a brand of the NBA that's dying, a brand that can only really build through the draft. Because nobody's gonna want to play in Salt Lake City, especially in the winter. That's why I think I don't want to go off on too big a tangent here. I think Utah is not going to have a team in 10 years, so I think they need this victory. They're a good team this year, but I think the Clippers will find a way to get it done in this series, and then they will inevitably lose in the next series because they are the Clippers. But it will be competitive. I think 6 or 7, but I'm going to take the Clippers in this one.
All right, there we go. We finally disagree on something.
Yeah. What's interesting about the first round is most typically they are fun games to watch, but the better team usually always wins, or the higher ranked team. And the 4 and 5 matchups are really interesting because you have the Wizards Hawks, and then you have the Clippers, Jazz. Of course, we agreed on the Wizards, but the Hawks do have a fighting chance. And then, of course, we agreed on the other one. But it's always a fun time of year, the first round of the NBA playoffs.
Right quick, I want to give a shout-out to one of our number one fans, Tyler Humphrey, saying that he believes Kawhi Leonard and the Spurs will go all the way this year. So thank you, Tyler, for your comment. Anyone else watching or listening in out there, comment away on my Facebook Live feed, on Kay's Facebook Live feed. We'd love to hear your opinion and give you a shout-out on the show. And with that, that's it for the NBA this week. Kind of moving along here so we can get to our NFL draft talk in about 10 minutes. But last thing we wanted to get to before that is some Champions League soccer, because we had a lot of action today.
We did. First of all, before we get into the Madrid-Bayern Munich matchup, unfortunately, our team, Leicester, who we've been cheering on for about a year now, has finally been knocked out. They did lose to Atletico Madrid in the second matchup. And, it was a close matchup still. For them to even get to the quarterfinals is a big deal.
The score line indicated that it was relatively close, but Atletico Madrid, throughout the home and away leg, had the better opportunities consistently. They dominated the pace of play and the style of play. So, it wound up 2-1 in the end in favor of Atletico Madrid, but they were the superior team by far. Unfortunately, the end of a magical run from Leicester, and we won't be seeing them back in the Champions League anytime soon. So, good on them for making it this far, but finally quality shined through, and Atletico Madrid was able to eliminate the Foxes.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think Atletico deserved to move on, but, you just got to keep rooting for that Leicester team. Fortunately, they will not be facing Premier League relegation, so that's always a good sign. You can keep rooting them on in the Premier League. Now, the other game that was played today, Real Madrid Bayern Munich, met with a lot of controversy. We had red cards, we had plenty of goals, we had extra time. What a matchup that was.
A great game for the first 90 minutes. It was incredibly fun to watch. Bayern Munich was able to match the scoreline from the first leg and win 2-1, which set the game. They were tied on aggregate, so it set the game to extra time. Unfortunately for the German Giants, they ran into a little trouble with the referees. A lot of controversy surrounding the game. Arguments that maybe Casemiro for Real Madrid should have been sent off earlier in the game after a second foul was not called on him. 5 minutes later, Vidal was shown a second yellow for Bayern Munich, which did not merit one whatsoever. He was sent off. That completely changes the complexity of the game. And then to add insult to injury, in extra time, when Ronaldo scored the go-ahead goal for Real Madrid, he was very clearly offsides.
Yeah, and of course the game ended up being 6-3 on aggregate, so maybe that goal wasn't the deciding factor, but it was definitely a big moment.
It was the demoralizing factor in the game, because down to 10 men with Real Madrid scoring, once that goal went in, you knew it was over. You just didn't expect Madrid to put 2 more goals away.
Right. I think Madrid moving on to their 7th semifinal in a row. How about that? That is a crazy statistic. It's hard to say that the better team won this time, because I think Bayern Munich was the better team if it wasn't for poor refereeing calls. To almost get it done at the Bernabeu says something. An overall good matchup, but I think this is more the reason to have video refereeing, video replay in these types of situations.
At least for such major calls that will influence a game like it did today.
Right. And, I think so. We're going to see Madrid in the final. Tomorrow's matchups, Monaco-Dortmund, I think Dortmund locks it up again. But the other big one, Barcelona-Juventus, which I will be kind of glued to my TV for, I don't know if they can come back another time.
I don't know if they have it in them. Again,
of course I want that.
That Juventus defense is a lot more stifling than PSG's was. So as good as Barcelona is, I don't know that they get as many goals as they need, especially considering the fact that Paulo Dybala is red hot and will most likely at least score one goal in this game. So
Well,
Barcelona's looking at an uphill battle.
Well, the thing is, yeah, they're going to have to, since they are playing at home, they're going to have to score 4 goals unanswered, or at least have a deficit of 4 goals to advance. Getting 3 is just not enough. Of course, they've done it before against PSG, but it's just not likely. The key to success for Barcelona is get that early goal like they did against PSG within the first 10 minutes. I mean, it just has to happen.
I think they do have a pretty good chance from the get-go. That being said, if Juventus can put away an early goal,
Yeah, it's over.
I think it might be over.
And
But who knows?
never say never. You can't do that. Because,
It is Barcelona, so you'll never know. Going back to the matchup that you just skipped over real quick, though, Monaco and Dortmund, I'm going with Monaco.
Actually, you're right. I don't know why I skipped over that so much because Monaco has the 3-2 victory. I didn't mean to do that.
That was a
And
great
Monaco-
game last
yeah.
week. We didn't get to cover it since I was alone last week and we talked a lot of baseball. But Monaco actually won that first game away in Germany 3-2. Now Dortmund did themselves a huge favor by getting a stoppage time goal from Kagawa right at the end to make it 3-2 because that 1 goal deficit is a lot easier to overcome than 2 goals down, especially with Monaco having scored 3 away goals.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. Monaco has the home field advantage, and that in Champions League is a moral advantage, but in terms of the aggregate score line, can kind of be a liability. If Dortmund can net one in, I believe they would tie it up because it would be.
They would tie it up, but Monaco would still be ahead on away goals.
They would. Okay, yeah, that's right. They would be.
But also the fact that was, I don't want to say necessarily completely looked over, but maybe not given as much attention as it should have been for the first leg of this matchup was the bomb that went off prior to the game. For those who didn't tune in last week, Monaco and Dortmund were getting ready to play their game. The Dortmund players hopped on their team bus and were on their way to the stadium when a bomb exploded on the side of the highway next to their team bus, injuring one of their center backs, Marc Bartra, who is thankfully okay now, but will be in a cast for a couple months. That put him out, and it shook the team. Really, the game was postponed that day, and it was replayed the very next day, but I don't know that Dortmund was ready for it. A lot of their players and executives were upset because UEFA notified them by text that the game would take place the next day.
Yeah, I mean it's everything with, especially the Champions League, is very calculated because the major teams play their games on probably the Saturday Sunday matchup in their domestic leagues, and so they don't have very much time to prepare for their Champions League matchups. And so I think since it's so calculated, this is what we're going to train, this is how we're going to eat, this is where we're going to get our energy, save our energy. I think just obviously you do have to have a postponement, but more than a text is it should be expected.
And a little bit of an explanation.
Sure.
Because I think Dortmund players and coaches were hoping for maybe a little bit more time off after such a traumatic event. It's
That's
not
true.
easy to go out 24 hours later after
It was actually less
after
than
something
24
like
hours,
that.
yeah, because they were playing the early slate. They were playing for the West Coast, it was a 9:45 a.m. kickoff time, where the Champions Leagues are always at 11:45. So, those 2 hours are crucial as well. I hope that Dortmund get it done. I want the better team to be in there, but Monaco's a good team to root for.
I think Monaco is the better team, and I think they put away 2 or 3 goals at home to take that matchup and move into the semis of the Champions League. I can't remember the last time a French team made it that far, but I'd love to see them keep going.
That's true. We have a comment here from Christian Sanford. He says, the fact that Dortmund was able to get back to a 1-goal deficit, which you pointed out earlier, really shows a lot due to the circumstances of that match. Dortmund will be completely different tomorrow. Should be a great match.
Again, either way, no matter what happens in this game, it will be exciting. We know
That's
that.
true.
because both teams play a great brand of football, a lot of attacking players. Always makes for a fun matchup.
That's true. I will be glued to my TV tomorrow, but I will be watching the Juventus-Barcelona match. It is exactly 3 o'clock. That means we can transfer into our Mock Draft Central mode. Favorite show of the year. You guys really want to tune in for this. We're going to do a live mock draft. We have not told each other our picks for the first round. We're going to go through all 32 picks. I'm really excited to get into this. Last year, I know we've mentioned this before if you've tuned in on the show, last year we beat the NFL mock draft experts in our picks. Of course, we are not going to count in for trading. Trades is something that we can't really account for. I know, Bix, you've done about, 6 mock drafts?
6 at this point, yeah.
There you go. I have just done the one, but I'm going to be kind of doing it more on the fly. A lot of things changing, but I'm excited to get into this, man.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one. Again, one of our favorite shows of the year. So let us know what you guys think in the comments, who your favorite players are in the draft. If you agree with us, disagree with us, we'd love to hear from you guys as we go pick by pick in the first round, because this is one of the more difficult drafts to predict in recent memory. I think, Kay, you would agree with me. It's been incredibly tough in making these mock drafts to actually settle on where certain players will go. Because everything from, even at this point, the number 1 pick seems to be up in the air.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, absolutely. Just pulling everything up here. I want to start by saying, 1, this draft is cornerback heavy, and I would say wide receiver heavy. So we're going to see a lot of picks like this. A big question right now, I think, is nobody can really decide where these quarterbacks are going to go or if they're going to go. So I'm ready to get into it whenever you are. Let's start off with pick number 1, my friend.
All right. The first pick of the 2017 NFL Draft is going to the Cleveland Browns.
That's right.
Nothing new.
Nothing new.
Reports coming out this week that they're considering passing on the consensus number 1 overall pick, Myles Garrett, to go out and select a quarterback, specifically Mitchell Trubisky, out of the University of North Carolina. Your thoughts on that, Kay?
What I want to say is I think Cleveland's front office mentality is very different from the head coaching mentality. If I'm not wrong, I think that they are going to pass on a quarterback and end up getting Myles Garrett. They're going to come to their senses. The reason I say that is they have a placeholder quarterback this year, and they're going to tank again to end up getting Sam Darnold next year. So my pick is Myles Garrett from Texas A&M, a freak athlete, one of the best prospects we've ever seen. A little cocky. I wouldn't take him personally. I wouldn't want him on my team for that reason. I'm a team-first guy. But it's got to be Myles Garrett from Texas A&M.
I think his cockiness works in his favor, and it's not something that would be a distraction to the team. But again, the consensus number 1 overall pick, freak athlete. He's going to do great things in Cleveland, and I think that they are not smart. We'll leave it at that. if they pass on him at number 1.
And the NFL consensus, based on Chad Reuter, Bucky Brooks, Daniel Jeremiah, and Charlie Casserly, all really smart guys. Their consensus is Myles Garrett. One of them does say Mitchell Trubisky, and that is the latest mock draft. So, could be a possibility.
We have a question coming in here from Mr. Tyler Humphrey asking us who our top quarterback is, each of us personally. And Tyler doesn't think that Deshaun Watson will be good in the NFL.
I agree.
Thank you for the question, Tyler.
Yeah, one of the things I will say about Deshaun Watson is that he has the intangibility of competitiveness and leadership that comes with 2 national championship games back-to-back. I don't think that will transfer into him being a good quarterback. I like Mitchell Trubisky, but don't sleep on Deshaun Kaiser.
Deshaun Watson is actually my top quarterback in this draft. I think he has what it takes to be an NFL quarterback. Everyone has a different opinion on him. I think he has the intangibles to do it and will be successful in the league given the chance to learn under maybe a veteran quarterback and not be thrown into the fire so quickly. Mitchell Trubisky is probably my second, and beyond that, it's kind of a toss-up depending on the team's needs. But I do think that Deshaun Watson will be successful in the NFL, but I don't have him going before Mitch Trubisky in my latest mock draft.
All right, that's interesting. Moving on to your San Francisco 49ers with pick number 2. Well, first of all, I want to say your team needs a lot of pieces. Right now, a lot of it is up in the air. Of course, you have John Lynch now, who is the new GM. Which way do you think he's going to lean?
This pick is difficult because in an ideal world, in a normal year, I think the Niners would trade down and out of this pick because there's no clear-cut choice for them at number 2. But the draft being the way it is, no one's going to want to trade up to number 2. So the Niners are going to pick in this spot, I'm convinced. I've got my fingers crossed that the Browns make a dumb move and select Mitchell Trubisky and leave us Myles Garrett, but that probably won't happen. So the best fit for me at this point would be Solomon Thomas, the defensive end out of Stanford. He's a Bay Area guy, had an extremely successful senior year and career down on the farm at Stanford. So I think he'd be a good fit, a good addition to the 49ers defense that's starting to make a little bit of a comeback, and I'd love to see him in the 49er red and gold.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree with you. I think Solomon Thomas is a good fit for them. He's a good NFL-ready player. You have to keep in mind, last year we had Jared Goff and Carson Wentz. So the first 2 consensus picks were like pretty consensus is what I was trying to say. Pretty solidified. Now, even if you look at any mock drafts across all of the major stations, even between us, we do agree on these first 2 picks, but everyone has someone different. Some people go, Mitch Trubisky first, Myles Garrett, Jamal Adams is sneaking up in there. A lot of options to go, Jonathan Allen even. So it's going to be a fun draft. Nobody's going to be able to call it correctly. Moving on, though, to the 3rd pick, I will agree with Solomon Thomas, though. To the Chicago Bears. Which way do you have them going?
I have them selecting a defensive lineman out of Alabama, Jonathan Allen, a name you mentioned a couple minutes ago. Again, one of the premier talents in the draft, and I think he just fits so well with what the Bears need right now. I think they pass on a quarterback. It'll be a stronger class next year. Why take a risk with such a high draft pick? Just take the best available player, and I think for them, that's going to be Jonathan Allen.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm going to have to go Jonathan Allen as well. I think he's a great player. Alabama players don't necessarily, or have not necessarily transferred really well. But I think on the defensive end, I mean, with that size and coachability, I think you want to take a guy like him. I will say, though, that is not the consensus NFL pick. They have Marshawn Lattimore from Ohio State. Only one guy has Jonathan Allen going, but I have to go that way. I think they shouldn't pass up on him. And so if this is going to be accurate, if our projections are accurate, the first 3 picks in the 2017 NFL Draft will all be defensive ends.
They're clearly the most talented players in the draft, so I think that would be good for the top 3 teams picking, but who knows? They could go a number of different ways. There are a lot of high-end talents at the top of this draft, especially at the defensive back position, so we're just going to have to wait and see how it all shakes out. But we've agreed on the first 3 picks. Something tells me it's going to be a little bit different here. Number 4, the Jacksonville Jaguars, I have selecting safety out of LSU, Jamal Adams. Now, I've gone back and forth with this pick. I think that they could potentially take a running back, like I'm pretty sure you have in your mock draft.
Yeah.
But I think Jamal Adams would be the final piece for that Jaguars defense that would put them in the conversation of being elite, almost. If their pieces come together like they want them to, coupled with their draft picks from last year, the Jacksonville Jaguars could have a stellar defense.
Well, here's the
rounded
thing.
out with Jamal Adams.
Yeah, they are going to have a stellar defense regardless, so that's my entire point. They signed A.J. Boye in the offseason. They signed Calais Campbell, who's on the defensive line. Last year they got Jalen Ramsey and Prince Amukamara, I believe. They are stacked already on the defense, so they need to go a different way. And that is why I'm going to say they have to take Leonard Fournette. He is a beast talent. We've said this over the last couple of years. His body's well rested. He is a pro-ready NFL running back, probably the next Adrian Peterson, and I don't even say that lightly. That is the also consensus overall pick for the NFL. All four guys have Leonard Fournette at 4. That's why I'm taking him at 4 as well. You can't pass up on a talent like that. They need that in the ever more competitive AFC South.
I don't see. I mean, Leonard Fournette is talented. Yes, I don't give him quite the praise that you do. I don't know if he's necessarily going to be an every down back coming out of college. So I think for now, with the TJ Yeldon, Chris Ivory tandem that the Jaguars have at running back, you throw Denard Robinson in there too, they have enough at this point. It's going to be more about finding a quarterback when they can. But again, I don't know if this is the draft to do that for them. So defense is what's going to win them games this year. I think they go with Jamal Adams and add that last piece to their defense and look to upgrade offensively later in the draft or maybe next year to get that quarterback that they're looking for.
All right, well, that's our first disagreement. We'd love to hear what you guys have to say. We're going to be going through picks 1 through 32 in our favorite show of the year. Thanks so much for tuning in. Our first disagreement, Leonard Fournette at 4 for me, Jamal Adams at 4 for you, for the Jaguars. Moving on to pick number 5.
Your Tennessee Titans.
That's right, one of 2 first-round picks. I have to say that this is the most exciting draft we've ever had. If you're a Titans fan, we're a young organization, but we have the pieces to go right now, and we have 2 first-round picks. Expect a lot of things to happen for us, most likely trading. But if I had to stay at number 5, I'm taking right now Jamal Adams, LSU. We need to back up our secondary, and I think Jamal Adams is the answer. I mean, that's why you have him going number 4. But I think with him left on the board, you can't pass up on the best available player in the draft outside of Myles Garrett. That's why we take Jamal Adams. He is an SEC guy. We like to draft SEC people, and this is where we're going to go.
Now, like you mentioned, Jamal Adams, extremely talented player, but he's already off the board for me.
Yeah.
So I'm going with the next best option in defensive backs for the Tennessee Titans, and that's going to be Marshawn Lattimore, the cornerback out of Ohio State University. I think he's the most talented cornerback in this draft. He'd fit great with the Titans. They need a little help outside to solidify that defense, and he's my pick at number 5. But also, you alluded to this a minute ago, but the Titans, with their 2 picks in the first round, have some room to move around. I wouldn't be surprised if they move down or maybe use their next pick to move up, something like that. I would count on there being some movement from the Titans. I just don't know what direction it's going to go and who's going to be their trade partner. But if I'm picking at number 5 for them, it's Marshawn Lattimore.
Yeah, Marshawn Lattimore is a good player. We signed Logan Ryan. We, the Titans, sorry. Logan Ryan, a great cornerback right now who's going to lead our offense. And I think, from what I am hearing, is you're familiar with Jason McCourty, I believe, Devin McCourty's brother. We released him over the break, and it's looking like Richard Sherman is on the board. So that is a big deciding factor.
That's some major speculation right now. We'll have to wait and see how that works out.
Yeah, that'll
certainly would change things.
Absolutely.
What they do with this 5th pick, but we will wait and see.
Absolutely. So that is pick number 5. We have our top 5. Just to recap, Bix is going Myles Garrett, Solomon Thomas, Jonathan Allen, Jamal Adams, Marshawn Lattimore. I am going Myles Garrett, Solomon Thomas, Jonathan Allen, Leonard Fournette, and Jamal Adams. Now moving on to number 6, the Jets, Jets. Which way are you going for them?
This is where my first quarterback comes off the board, okay? I mentioned a few minutes ago that my first guy off the board would be Mitchell Trubisky, and it is here at number 6 to the Jets. Their quarterback situation is a mess. They have a couple guys up in New York, but it's not working out.
Uh-huh.
And they need a more talented player that's going to be able to come in and make a difference. I don't think he'll start week 1, but give Mitchell Trubisky a season to figure things out, and he could be their guy of the future if things pan out.
All right, well, he's definitely a coachable player. I don't know if he is Jets ready, per se. I can see how you would see him in a Jets uniform. It's a good pick, but I'm going to have to go another way. I'm going to actually go with, since my mock draft's a little different, right now, Marshawn Lattimore going to the cornerback position at the Jets. The reason for that is, Darrelle Revis is getting old. They're going to need another guy, and for my mock draft, Lattimore is a good player to take at this position. I don't see enough in Watson or Trubisky, or frankly any quarterback in this draft, enough to make them franchise quarterback worthy. I have them going lower in the first round, and we'll get to that in a bit, but neither of them top 10. So at this pick, you take Marshawn Lattimore. The consensus from the NFL actually was Deshaun Watson going here. So I don't think that's how it's going to work out. I don't think Deshaun Watson is a good fit for them, but that's how they have it going. I have Lattimore, and you have Mitchell Trubisky. So our first quarterback for you taken off the board.
There you go. And with that, moving on to number 7, the now Los Angeles Chargers.
That's right. Formerly, as made famous by the San Diego Chargers. They are following me up to 5. I am moving to LA soon, and they have already done so. Which way you have them going, man?
I think we have a pretty similar pick here. I've got Malik Hooker, the defensive back out of Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
Again, he's going to be the best player left on the board at this point, and the Chargers desperately need help in their secondary, so it's a natural fit.
Yeah, I agree with you. They have historically had a pretty good secondary room for the last, I would say, 5 to 10 years. But Malik Hooker is a great talent. You don't want to pass up on him. And they are not looking, I would say, to take a quarterback yet. And that is the overall consensus for the NFL as well as me. Malik Hooker, number 7 to the Chargers.
Now, number 8, Carolina Panthers. Another pick that I think could potentially see some movement. The Panthers could look to trade down in this draft because it's not a great position for them to be picking. But as we can't account for that, with the Carolina Panthers pick, this is where Leonard Fournette comes off the board for me. I think he's the perfect fit for the Panthers' offensive scheme, and sticking him next to Cam Newton would be scary for opposing defenses. So Leonard Fournette is the guy for me at number 8.
Yeah, it certainly would be a very good matchup for them. As I have Leonard Fournette going number 4, I'm going to have to stick with Dalvin Cook. I still think he's a great alternative at the running back position. Dalvin Cook, FSU guy, very good running back. Of course, FSU has always been talented on their O-line and their quarterback position, so taking a lot of heat off of them. But you can say the same thing about the Panthers. They're re-upping again that O-line. They have Cam Newton. To have a good running back, Jonathan Stewart just never got it done, really. To have a good running back in Dalvin Cook and you and Leonard Fournette, I would say that's the best pick to go. They have to go running back.
Everyone seems to disagree on who the top running back in this draft is. It gets difficult. You throw Christian McCaffrey now even into that discussion with some of the things we've heard in the last week. It comes down to personal opinions and which guy each individual person likes best. So I think Fournette is the best fit for the Panthers, but if he comes off the board earlier, I could see them potentially going Dalvin Cook or even somewhere else.
That's an interesting pick, for the Panthers, because typically you would think that maybe the Panthers want to go more defense since they lost so many pieces last year. But I think if either Fournette or Cook is on the board, I think you got to go there. They can build in the second and third rounds.
And that moves us on to the 9th pick of the first round, the Cincinnati Bengals. And now this is where the draft starts to get muddier and muddier. It gets a lot more difficult. There's a lot of options for these teams in the early and late teens. But at number 9, I have Derek Barnett, defensive end out of the University of Tennessee.
That's a good pick. Barnett is scoring really high as a defensive end. This is where my draft gets really muddy as well. I'm not even going to go off the mock draft I have on the board. I'm going to switch it up a little bit, and I'm going to go Reuben Foster out of linebacker out of Alabama. I think he's a good person to build your defense around if you're the Cincinnati Bengals. Consistently, always been pretty good as a team. But I think if you get a guy like Reuben Foster, he had a great championship game, a great overall college football playoff. Has been a good player for a while now. He's got the size, got the coachability. I'm going to go Reuben Foster.
I think at this point the Bengals have enough decent linebackers that they're going to be okay at the position. What they need is a pass rusher, and I think Barnett can get that done for them. So that was the thinking behind my pick. Could be a little high for him. I know this is probably the top end of what he's valued at, but I think he's an extremely valuable talent, and I've got him at number 9 here to the Bengals. So Reuben Foster for Kay, Derek Barnett for myself, and now moving on to number 10, the Buffalo Bills. Another pick where you could see some movement happening.
You certainly could. But I think the Buffalo Bills, new coaching staff over there, they want to build and get good players. I have them taking another Clemson wide receiver. They took Sammy Watkins not that far back. In Mike Williams. I think Mike Williams is a great player, and he is a top 10 pick. I think that he can revitalize that offense, and if you have Sammy Watkins, there at the number 2 and put Mike Williams at the number 1, the secondary is going to be very confused. And of course, the Bills, they're not playing in an easy division. They have a lot of good competitors, and they need as many talented players as they can get. Mike Williams is a difference maker.
And they, like you say, they need targets for Tyrod Taylor. I have the same pick as you. I have Mike Williams going number 10 to the Buffalo Bills. And a lot of people forget, not only did Mike Williams come from Clemson like Sammy Watkins, but they played at Clemson together. And Sammy Watkins was essentially a mentor for a young Mike Williams at the time, and will have the opportunity to be that again as he welcomes his former teammate in college to the NFL. I think that would be a great fit. They would have a lot of chemistry between the two. And now Tyrod Taylor is looking at 2 fantastic targets on the outside, which would really expand that Buffalo Bills offense.
So I think that's a good pick for the both of us. That is looking to be the consensus NFL pick. I think Mike Williams ends up at number 10 to the Buffalo Bills. Moving on to number 11, we have the New Orleans Saints. Pick 1 of 2. Who you got going over here?
This is where I have Reuben Foster coming off the board. You had him a couple picks earlier to the Cincinnati Bengals. I don't think he falls that far. Probably, arguably, the best linebacker in this draft. Has a couple off-the-field issues, but I think the teams will be able to look past that, and he falls to number 11 at New Orleans.
All right. Well, that's a good pick. I actually have the opposite of you. I had Reuben Foster going number 9 to the Cincinnati Bengals, and I have Derek Barnett, who you picked at number 9, going number 11 to the Saints. I think Barnett is a good player. He could, I've said this a lot, but I think he can revitalize that defense that desperately needs it, especially after Bountygate, which was, 5 years ago. They haven't had a solid defense since then.
Long time ago now.
Yep. Derek Barnett's a great player. I've personally seen him play at the University of Tennessee. Great, absolute talent. A lot of teams have hosted them and have been impressed by the way he handles himself, his poise. And he's played against top talent in the SEC, so I think that's really important looking at SEC players. I'm going Derek Barnett at 11. The NFL is all over the board with this one. Some guys have Lattimore going here. Some guys have Garrett Conley, Reuben Foster, Derek Barnett. So there's no consensus pick there.
All right. Now, at number 12, we have the Cleveland Browns' second pick of the first round. And with that pick, I have them selecting dynamic tight end out of the University of Alabama, O.J. Howard. Consensus number 1 tight end and maybe, pass catcher in this entire draft.
I agree. I actually was hoping that he would fall to number 18 so the Titans could pick him up. But I have O.J. Howard going here as well. It looks like that's the consensus pick for the NFL. I think O.J. Howard is a supreme talent, Gronkowski-like. I don't know if he will thrive in the Cleveland Browns offense, but, of course, that's why you start taking players to build an identity. And I think O.J. Howard is the pick that you need in this situation.
Yeah, they're building for the future, and if they can bring in a good quarterback in next year's draft,
Yep.
they are incredibly well set up for the future.
I agree. And, we've said that in the past, but a lot of these players that we've mentioned for the Cleveland Browns have been surefire picks. I just hope that their front office gets it together for Cleveland's sake. I think Cleveland needs it. O.J. Howard, great player, not to be missed. He's going to make an immediate impact in that AFC North.
All right, so we agree on that pick.
Yep.
And that brings us to number 13, the Arizona Cardinals. Now, for this pick, I went offense again because you have Larry Fitzgerald retiring in a couple of years.
Sure.
Or sooner than a couple of years.
They got rid of Michael Floyd.
The Cardinals got rid of Michael Floyd, and that receiver core is starting to be more and more depleted.
Yeah.
So I've got the second best wide receiver in this draft, Corey Davis, going at number 13 to the Arizona Cardinals. Gives him a year or two to learn under Larry Fitzgerald, come into his own, and potentially be that number one wide receiver for Arizona.
That's a good pick. I will have to say that is a... Where do I want to go? How do I want to say this? I think you have to give a nod to how good Larry Fitzgerald has been by saying, you know what, we want a guy like you because it shows how big of an impact you've had on us. And I think the Cardinals will say that. That being said, I'm going a different direction. I think that Arizona and the way that they're looking at things with Carson Palmer are going to take a quarterback here, and it's not Mitchell Trubisky. I think they're going to somewhat panic and think that Deshaun Watson's the guy to go with. So I have Deshaun Watson going at number 13. I'm going off what my mock draft says up here, but that's who I have going. I don't think it'll be a good pick, but I think that's what they're going to take.
There you go. That's your first quarterback off the board.
That's right.
So there we go. We each have one off the board.
You haven't taken Deshaun
Mitchell's off for me, and Deshaun is off for you. All right. Number 14, Philadelphia Eagles. Now, this is where things, again, start to get more interesting. Because
I agree.
If you guys aren't familiar with Colin Cowherd's radio show, The Herd, on Fox Sports 1, he and Christine Leahy the other day broke the news that there was a team picking somewhere in the teens that had guaranteed Christian McCaffrey they would draft him if he fell to them. Now it's just up to the guessing game, who everyone thinks it's going to be. I have McCaffrey coming off the board right here at number 14 to the Philadelphia Eagles. I think scheme-wise he fits in to what the Eagles do. He can be a running back. He can split out wide, catch passes out of the backfield. I think he'd be a perfect fit for this Eagles offense and would be a nightmare for anyone facing him because they don't know who to use to cover him.
You know what? I have to agree with you here. I think Christian McCaffrey has proven himself both as a running back and slot receiver. If you have a young running back in Carson Wentz, picture him in the shotgun, one set back. The defense is rushing at him. He can just dump it off to Christian McCaffrey. He'll do his thing. He's a track and field star, fast guy, got the brute strength. I think Christian McCaffrey's perfect for a rookie quarterback here. Again, picture that shotgun situation again, one set back. McCaffrey moves to the slot, and then you get a quick slant fade and get another first down. I think that's why McCaffrey is so good because he's dynamic. Carson Wentz needs him. Of course, a lot of people say that maybe McCaffrey doesn't have the size. I think he does to be good in the slot. And you have to remember that Carson Wentz is tall. So if McCaffrey's a little shorter, Wentz can dump it off to him, and McCaffrey can do his thing from there. It reminds me a little bit of a Westbrook back in the day, Brian Westbrook. I don't know if you remember that name.
Absolutely.
So,
great running back.
I think McCaffrey goes there off the board. It'll be a great pick for them.
All right. Surprising consensus pick on number 14 there. Now number 15, the Indianapolis Colts. Now, another tough pick, an organization that needs a whole lot of different holes to be filled. It's hard to come up with a consensus pick here But that being said, I'm going with another defensive back out of the University of Alabama, Marlon Humphrey.
Well, that's a good pick. I think Marlon Humphrey, that's a little too early for me. I'm going to have to go to Karis McKinley, who has been climbing the draft boards, up and up. I think the reason I got to go with them is they want another defensive end, but a little bit quicker. So this guy comes from the Pac-12, UCLA guy. I think that's the way they're going to go. He was projected to be in the second round, but I think his rise after the Combine and the Pro Day has led a lot of players and scouts, a lot of teams and scouts to believe that he is the best pick to go there.
I've had him going to the Colts in a couple of my mock drafts. Marlon Humphrey has moved up. This is kind of the high end for him, where I've got him going at number 15. But in the end, I just like his talent, and he's more of a sure thing than Karis McKinley. McKinley's good. He has the physical abilities and is a freak athlete, but it remains to be seen how coachable he is and how well he's going to do in an NFL situation. So I have him coming off the board a couple picks from now, but not quite at number 15.
All right. Moving on to number 16. So we are approaching the middle of the draft. It's already getting really muddy. We have different picks all over the board. This draft is going to be one of the most exciting drafts we ever see. There's going to be so many trades on draft day. There's going to be so many shock surprises. Of course, last year there was a lot of shock surprises with Laramie Tunsil getting that video leaked of him. There's not going to be anything like that, but since this draft is so stacked in key positions, like the cornerback, defensive line position, stuff like that, I think that is why it's going to be so exciting, because it's so talent heavy. So now moving on to the Baltimore Ravens, who do you have going here?
This is where I have my first offensive lineman coming off the board in the draft, and that would be Cam Robinson out of Auburn. A guy that seems to have fallen off most people's radars as the season has gone on. At the beginning of the season, he was a consensus top 5 pick, if not the top pick in the draft. So, had a decent season, still a first-round talent. I think it's a great fit here for the Baltimore Ravens. He'd be great in purple for those guys, and I just like the fit all around. It's a good spot for him to go. The Ravens need protection for Joe Flacco, and he's that kind of big body that's going to get it done for them.
Well, it's a good point. I think Cam Robinson is a star player. I don't think that the Baltimore Ravens are going to want to take an O-lineman here. I'm going to go with a little bit of a wild card pick. And I am going to go, lost in my mind, Hassan Reddick. I think, I had him going a little earlier to the Colts or the Philadelphia Eagles a little earlier, but I think Hassan Reddick brings a lot of options to the table. Played at a small school, played at Temple. He was a linebacker. I think people realize in the Baltimore Ravens organization that, one, Ray Lewis is gone now. Two, Terrell Suggs is not far from leaving. You need a core strength player at the linebacker position. Hassan Reddick brings a lot of the talent and a lot of the characteristics of a Ray Lewis, Terrell Suggs. They didn't really play in terms of brute strength and in terms of passion, not far from Hassan Reddick. So I like him. I've seen the film on him. I really think he's a good pick, and I think that's the way the Baltimore Ravens are going to go.
All right, there you have it, about halfway through the draft. Moving on to the Washington Redskins. Right here, I've got a cornerback out of Ohio State, Garyon Conley. They need help in their secondary, and he's the kind of experienced player that could bring that assistance, a guy that took over for Eli Apple a couple of years ago when he went down. Apple now plays with the New York Giants, but Conley came in, took his starting role when he left, and dominated. He was great. He was a shutdown corner for the Buckeyes, and I like him at number 17.
Yeah, I think Garyon Conley gets looked over a lot because of Lattimore and what Lattimore has brought to the table for him being a consensus number 5 overall pick. I think Garyon Conley is a good player. I don't know if he'll be able to shine, though, and that's where I have reservations for him. So I'm going to go actually Jabril Peppers, who was in the Heisman running, very dynamic player. Has
Got him high up.
I got him high up. I think he can bring a lot to the table in the nickel, in the dime. I think he's going to be playing in the safety slot, but he can ball hawk like no one else. And I think Jabril Peppers can also sell a lot of tickets, sell a lot of jerseys. I like him at the Washington Redskins.
Okay, good pick there. Now we're getting back to your favorite team at number 18,
That's
the
right.
Tennessee Titans. I've struggled with this pick a little bit because I like the idea of them taking an offensive player, but a couple of the best receivers are off the board at this point. O.J. Howard is off the board for me. I could see them potentially taking David Njoku, who is the second best tight end of the draft
Miami,
out
right?
of the University of Miami.
Yeah.
Incredibly skilled player, very talented, has the athletic ability to be a first-round draft pick. I've had him going in this slot in a couple of my mock drafts, but my most recent pick is Malik McDowell. He's a defensive tackle out of Michigan State. Just a absolutely huge force in the middle of the field that will be able to get up the gut and get some pressure on these quarterbacks, some of these inexperienced quarterbacks that the Tennessee Titans are facing. So I like McDowell at this pick.
Well, that's an interesting pick. I don't think a lot of mock drafts have him. But I did make a mistake in terms of the fact that I built my mock draft, around Titans needs first. Of course, that's not how it works. But I think the reason I say that is I'm going to go Corey Davis at number 18. I have reservations about him falling that far, but I think that's where the Titans want him. And I think he really likes the Titans as well. So I have Corey Davis going 18 because they really need to answer that wide receiver position. And I think it's not that far of a reach. I mean, I think he's the second best player at that position. He's not going to go as high up as Mike Williams. And I think, so I have them going, to answer Marcus Mariota's prayers, I have him going 18. My true wish list would be O.J. Howard, but he's not going to fall that far as well.
Yeah, I think you're out of luck on that one.
Yeah.
Unless you trade up.
Yeah.
So who knows?
That's true.
That leaves us at number 19.
Yep.
Getting there. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I've got a guy here that you mentioned a few minutes ago, Takarius McKinley. The kind of raw talent that the Buccaneers love. It seems to be all the draft picks they've had in the last couple of years, and will be a force on the defensive line. Pretty straightforward pick for me here.
Yeah, I mean, he's a good player. As I mentioned in my analysis, I think he's lean, and I think he's got that speed. I think that's really important. He had a great pro day, and he had a great combine, and those are really big for evaluating players, obviously. So he will be rising, and I think 19 is a good position for him. I have him at 15 to the Colts. I am going to go Cam Robinson here. I think just give Jameis Winston that extra added, protection. I love Cam Robinson. I think he's one of the best players in the NFL, but a lot of analysts have him falling, and I think that's just because the talent is getting for other positions is getting higher and higher. You got to take a guy like Cam Robinson here. Just build around Winston. I don't like Winston. I'm not a fan of him, but he's a winner, and you want to just give him that protection so he doesn't get injured and your position as a budding franchise is hurt.
Yeah. It would be a good fit for there if Cam Robinson falls all the way. I do have him going a couple picks earlier, but I would like him potentially at the Buccaneers as well. Now, that leads me into my second offensive lineman coming off the board, and that is Ryan Ramczyk. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I'm not entirely sure. Out of Wisconsin, I believe. And, again, it's pretty agreed upon that the Broncos need an offensive lineman here. He's just the next best guy off the board for me, and I think it fills a need. The Broncos get a good pick, and that's that.
Yeah, actually, I have Ramczyk going a little further down. I'm going to have the Broncos taking Garrett Bowles, who is another offensive lineman. I think Garrett Bowles, a Midwestern
Out of Utah
player. I think he's a good player for the Broncos, and I've heard that the Broncos like him over there. So if he's on the board, I think they take him there. Pretty straightforward.
Great. Now, through the first 20 picks of the draft, we just want to remind you guys, if you have any comments, any guys you particularly like in this year's draft, comment away. We'd love to give you a shout out on the show and interact with you guys a little bit. So there you go. Those are our first 20 picks. Moving on here, 21K.
Yeah, well, I want to say that if you are keeping up with us, Mitchell Trubisky's still on the board for me.
And Deshaun Watson's still out there for me.
Yep. So, what do we go at 21 to the Lions?
21.
Yeah, I like a guy in Charles Harris, outside linebacker out of Missouri, another SEC guy. I like him because he's a player that can bring a lot of. He's moldable, is what I'm trying to say. He's got that raw talent, and I think if you can coach him up, he can be a difference maker in that ever competitive division.
I'm surprised we agree on this pick, actually, because Charles Harris is not someone that's necessarily thought of as going this high or even in the first round. He's a top-end talent, but I agree with everything you said. Very moldable, very skilled player, and I think at times overlooked playing at Mizzou. That was a school that was so bad this year. There's really no other word for it.
Yeah.
So he's been overlooked a little bit. I like him at this spot. I think he fits really well with the Detroit Lions, and I'm going to agree with you on that pick.
All right, another agreement. Cool. Moving on to the Finns, the Miami Dolphins. They are looking to have a strong draft because, they need some answers to be, or they need some questions to be answered. The reason I say that is because I think they're going to go with a guy that always has all the answers. This is his brother, T.J. Watt. That was really hard to say. But I think they like T.J. Watt. I think T.J. Watt has, according to his brother J.J., has a better talent pool right now coming into the draft than J.J. did. So I think, that's always high praise. I think they go that direction. You got to rely on pedigree sometimes. If J.J. Watt has the ability to do that, I think T.J. Watt should be a guy to be looked into. Wisconsin.
I agree he should be looked at, and he's a great talent, but he's nowhere near what his brother was, so you do have to separate that a little bit. And I like him, but I like him to go early in the second round on day 2 of the draft. At this spot, I do have the Dolphins selecting a linebacker, but for me it's going to be Zach Cunningham out of Vanderbilt. Another very talented guy at a school that kind of flies under the radar, but I think Zach Cunningham would do great for the Miami Dolphins. They need to solidify that linebacker position. They need someone that can take control of their defense, and he's my guy.
All right. Moving on to pick number 23, the New York Football Giants. I have them selecting an offensive lineman. I don't know if you're leaning that direction as well.
I do as well, but I have a feeling it's going to be different names for each of us.
Yeah, I have them going Ryan Ramczyk. I know you had them going to the Denver Broncos earlier. I'm going to go Ryan Ramczyk. I think he will end up here. The reason I say that is because Garrett Bowles was a better pick for the Broncos, and the next person wanting to take a offensive lineman would be the Giants, and that's where Ramczyk ends up.
I like Garrett Bowles, but he's such a polarizing prospect, and people don't really know what to make of him, so I don't have him going in my first round. Instead, I have Forrest Lamp out of Western Kentucky coming off the board right here to the New York Giants. I think, again, very straightforward pick. I see them taking an offensive lineman. We don't necessarily know who it'll be, but Lamp is the best guy on the board for me at this point, so that's the way I'm going.
All right. Moving on to the Raiders, soon-to-be Las Vegas Raiders.
Very interesting pick here for me, and of the entire draft, besides maybe Myles Garrett, one of the only picks that hasn't really changed much across my mock drafts because I just like the fit here with Taco Charlton.
Yeah, see, I like Taco Charlton a lot, and I had him early on in my drafts, but I think with Jack Del Rio, I think he's going to look at Taco Charlton and be like, you know what, we're going to be moving franchises. Is this the guy that I want as a leader in 3 years to the other rooks? And I'm going to say no there. And I think Taco Charlton is a talented player. But I'm going to go Zach Cunningham. I want him to be paired up with Khalil Mack. I think that'll be a really cool fit for both of them. Khalil Mack kind of being a leader to Zach Cunningham, but then Zach Cunningham getting the secondary role in that position.
Why don't you like Taco as a leader in the future?
I think Taco is a little bit. Where did he play again?
He played at Michigan.
Yeah. I think Taco is not the player I want to go with. I think he ends up falling to the second round. He's had some personal difficulties in the past. So
A little bit, but I think he's too talented to fall to the second round. NFL.com has him as a top 10 talent of any player in this draft.
Really?
And the Raiders just love anything with that size and raw talent. So they're in a position where he doesn't have to start immediately. And the Raiders have an elite defense. He can learn from a whole lot of guys and maybe have the opportunity to grow up a little bit. So I like Taco. I think he could be a good fit for the rough and tumble Raiders that we're used to.
all right. Well,
Fun fact, though, the Raiders currently are the how do I phrase this? They haven't had an arrest in 3 years, and that is a longer period than any other NFL team. So the tides are turning.
The tides are turning.
It's not quite the Raiders we're used to.
Well, let's see what happens when they go to Vegas.
That's going to change in a heartbeat.
I'm a proponent of the Vegas Raiders, and I don't think Taco Charlton is the guy that they want. I think they have to think in that mindset. Who are we going to draft now that's going to make an impact when we move to the desert? Moving on to pick number 25, the Houston Texans. They are in a difficult situation here. They were banking on Tony Romo. They got rid of Brock Osweiler's contract, traded away those, I believe, a second-round pick or something like that. Tony Romo became a broadcaster. So do you have them going quarterback here?
So they are in need of a quarterback,
That's
and
right.
I indeed have them going with a quarterback. I can see that it looks like you do as well.
Yeah,
Although
but
you have Mitchell Trubisky,
I do.
and I have Deshaun Watson, the two quarterbacks that have been waiting to come off both of our big boards. So
Who'd you have Mitchell Trubisky going to? Oh, the
Mitchell
Jets.
Trubisky I have to the Jets
Yeah.
earlier on. But at this point, I think you would agree, Kay, it's pretty straightforward. With both the other quarterbacks in our mocks coming off the draft much earlier, these guys, whoever would be the second quarterback taken in the draft, clearly the next elite talent. So it makes sense for the Texans to take either one of them at 25, especially if they fall that far.
Well, what I want to say is, I was watching, John Gruden's QB camp. I was watching that, and I was watching Mitchell Trubisky on it. I wasn't really sold on him. With quarterbacks, there's an it factor, and that's why I've had him falling so far to 25. I think the Texans are desperate, so they're going to take him here. But I wasn't sold on him as a leader, as a mental leader. I saw him on Mariucci's whiteboard as well, which is like the NFL Network equivalent. I don't know. Like I said, though, I think he's going to go here to 25 because the Texans are desperate, but that's why I don't have him higher.
I think Mitchell Trubisky in NFL circles is being more highly regarded
As Deshaun.
currently than Deshaun.
I agree.
So that's why I had him so high. But Deshaun Watson, I feel like, will go overlooked, and so many teams have other more pressing needs and might shy away from him so high in the draft that, given the opportunity, the Texans will take him at 25 if he drops so low.
All right.
So there you go.
moving-
Both our second quarterbacks are off the board. And that moves us to pick 26 with the Seattle Seahawks. And a pick that seems to be somewhat of a consensus
Yeah.
if it actually comes around. Kevin King, cornerback out of the University of Washington. It would be an easy transition for him.
Yeah, you wouldn't even have to
Playing in Seattle. And if he falls this far, I think a lot of people agree this is the pick for Seattle, especially with potentially Richard Sherman taking off.
That's what I was going to say. Is that with that stirring around, it's somewhat of a consensus that they really like Kevin King out there. What's interesting for me is that I still have Gary and Conley on my board, and so I would see that them if they're following my mock draft, I would see them sort of considering Gary and Conley, but I think Kevin King is a good fit for them. They like Washington. They like Pac-12 players. And if Richard Sherman's off the board, Kevin King's a guy that they can build around. Earl Thomas, though, is a big question mark on if he's going to be as impactful. And they need that in the formula of the Legion of Boom. So Big question there, but I think they go quarterback, and I think they go Kevin King.
27, the Kansas City Chiefs. Now here, I've got a guy that you had coming off the board quite a bit earlier, Hassan Reddick, defensive end. I think he just adds to what the Chiefs have to offer on defense. They continue to look to solidify that side of the ball because, again, that's what's gotten them to the position that they're in right now, and there's no other offensive player that merits being taken at this point. So Hassan is my pick.
Hassan, he's a good player. That's why I have him going so far up. In my original mock draft, I had the Chiefs taking a quarterback here. I think they're losing patience with Alex Smith. I actually had them taking Patrick Mahomes over Deshaun Kaiser, but I'm going to change my pick up a little bit. I think they go Gareon Conley. If they're, according to my mock draft, if he's still on the board, you got to take him. You had him going way higher, and I think that's a good pick for them because they have Eric Berry in that secondary. Signed him to a big franchise, but they need better cornerbacks.
Okay.
Hassan.
The next pick is probably one of the picks that I will be most interested in the draft. Very excited about it. The Dallas Cowboys. I have a guy coming off the board here who's probably, on a lot of people's boards, a second-round talent, but knowing Jerry Jones and his love for anything flashy, I think Adoree Jackson sneaks into the late first round, the cornerback out of USC and dominant return man. He's incredibly quick, incredibly fun to watch, will sell tickets and jerseys. I've got Adoree Jackson at 28 to the Dallas Cowboys.
It's a good pick. I see it. But in that boys uniform, I have fallen in love with how great Marlon Humphrey would fit in that situation. I think coming out of Alabama, being a cornerback there, I think Marlon Humphrey, I can already picture that uniform so perfectly. I think Marlon Humphrey's a great fit for them, so I'm going to go there. Again, sticking with the quarterback position. If I'm not wrong, I think Marlon Humphrey can still do some returning. He's quick.
I agree with you. I like that Marlon Humphrey pick, but just there's something about Adoree Jackson and his flashiness that will catch Jerry Jones's eye. So that's the direction I'm going in.
I want to say, you don't have John Ross off the board yet, do you?
I do not. I do not have him going in the first round.
Oh, spoiler. Okay, cool. Moving on to number 29, the Green Bay Packers. What's the direction you want them to head in this year, man?
Back to another difficult pick. I have them taking a cornerback out of Colorado, Chidobe Awuzie.
Yeah.
I think that would be a good pick. That being said, there were some rumblings that the Packers need a running back. And with Fournette off the board, they could
Dalvin Cook.
and Christian McCaffrey.
And
Dalvin Cook is still on the board for me. So
got it.
in my mock, I could potentially see Cook going here, but also a really interesting situation would be what happens with Joe Mixon. And obviously this is a guy that has a lot of baggage coming along with him, got in trouble for some major domestic violence issues while he was a freshman at the University of Oklahoma. In my opinion, he would have been the number one running back in this draft had that not happened, but obviously when you do something so terrible, your stock is going to fall, and I mean, arguably, in my opinion, you probably maybe shouldn't even be in the NFL, but that's a discussion for another day.
Sure.
That being said, he's incredibly talented, and the Packers could potentially look his way at that point if they're willing to overlook what he brings with him in terms of off-the-field stuff. That aside, I don't think it's enough to draw the Packers in. They could get someone. They could trade up early in the second round to get their running back. There are a couple other guys like Alvin Kamara from the University of Tennessee on the board. So I'm going with Chidobe Awuzie.
All right. It's funny you mentioned Alvin Kamara because I think he's a great talent. I don't think that he goes to the Packers now, but they are still needed. They are in need of a cornerback as well. So I actually have Quincy Wilson out of the University of Florida going there, beating out his fellow player Tease Tabor. Here, I think Quincy Wilson is a very talented player. He goes by the name of Q in some circles, I've heard. And I think, the Packers will realize that is a good pick. Look, I mean, there's so many quarterbacks in this draft that Quincy Wilson, I've seen him going in the top 5, the top 10, and all the way in the 3rd round. I mean, that's how stacked this draft.
There are a lot of defensive backs in this draft.
Yeah, I mean, I've already picked I've already picked like 4 in a row.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, there you have it. A lot of defensive backs coming off the board. Moving to the 30th pick, almost there. The Pittsburgh Steelers. This is where I have your playmaker, Jabril Peppers. I think he's more of a late first-round talent. He fits with the Steelers really well, can be the return man that they need, and also help out on defense, whether it's as a linebacker if he grows a little bit, or in the secondary.
All right. That's a good pick. There's no consensus for the Steelers. People have Peppers, T.J. Watt, Deshaun Kaiser to be a replacement. That would be interesting. I don't think that they take a quarterback in this draft. I'm going to actually go John Ross. I think if they need to answer return man capabilities, if they need a great slot receiver for Big Ben, coupled with Antonio Brown, I think
Did you not take John Ross earlier?
I did not.
Not to the Cardinals?
No, I didn't.
All right.
I took Deshaun Watson.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. So I think John Ross, too good of a talent. They do have Martavis Bryant. They do have Antonio Brown. But I think if you can stack up on one position, I sometimes say that that's a good move to go with. We saw that in the New York Giants last year when they took Sterling Shepard, even though they had Odell, Victor Cruz. So I think it's going to be a similar situation.
Absolutely. As we enter the last couple minutes of our show here, we have our last 2 picks. The Atlanta Falcons at 31, I have taken Caleb Brantley, a defensive tackle out of the University of Florida. I think he's the best guy at that position, left over. A couple of the better offensive linemen have already been taken in this draft, in my mock at least. So Caleb's the pick for me. Falcons need a little help on the defensive line.
All right, not a bad pick. I like the pick. But I'm going to go Forrest Lamp. I think they still need some work on that O-line. They're going to come off of a Super Bowl high and kind of have a quote-unquote sophomore slump. So they need a guy that can solidify that offensive line, keep Matt Ryan healthy, open up holes for Devontae and Tevin. And I think Forrest Lamp's the guy to go with.
With that, we come to our final picks of the first round. At number 32, I have the New Orleans Saints selecting Tre'Davious White, cornerback out of LSU.
A good pick. I have to agree with you there for that last little bit. Tre'Davious White, another cornerback. I want to say, I believe we are going to be taking 8 cornerbacks and 3 more safeties. So 11 out of the 32 picks are going to be defensive backs. That's incredible.
Wow.
That just shows how big a talent pool it is. And not even off the board yet. For example, Tease Tabor, a solid cornerback, could go in the second round.
A lot of guys that will go early in the second round.
Yeah, so you're going to see a lot of cornerbacks in this draft. And overall, we had a lot of disagreements. There's going to be so many directions that this draft heads, not even counting trades.
It's going to be up in the air for sure. It's going to be incredibly tough to determine where guys are going to go.
I mean, there's
even in the top couple picks.
There's not even a consensus for number 1. They could surprise everyone.
But how about this? We've done our first round mocks. We've got it in the books. Give me one player you're looking for in the later rounds that maybe is not getting as much attention right now that you think would be a good pick later on that's being overlooked.
Juju Smith-Cluster. I think
Schuster.
Cluster. Juju Smith-Schuster, yeah. Honestly, he was a top 5 pick a year ago before they even played. USC kind of had a slump year, sort of. And I think he's a great wide receiver. I could see him going second round. Another name I've mentioned a couple times because he's a friend of a friend, Tease Tabor. He had a horrible combine, horrible pro day, but football IQ wise, I've seen it firsthand. Great talent. He's going to end up somewhere in the second round. Could make an immediate impact. So Juju and Tease.
All right. I think my guy would probably be Josh Dobbs,
Okay.
quarterback out of Tennessee. Came out this week saying he has a lot of the same knocks on him as Dak Prescott did last year's draft. I've really liked him ever since he was probably a junior. So look for him in the middle rounds to maybe come off the board and team to get lucky with a future quarterback.
All right, quick
prospect.
hits. We have 5 seconds. Sorry to cut you off. We both only had 2 quarterbacks going in the draft. Very low for that. Some more quick hits. Barcelona game tomorrow. Nashville Predators have a 3-0 lead. Anything you want to add? Let's end it.
That's going to be about it.
Yeah.
Remember, Kay will not be here again next week, which is why we had to do our mock drafts early.
Yep.
Things may change between now and the draft. We'll keep you guys posted on how our final mocks end up. But be sure to tune in next week. I believe I will have a show for you guys without Kay again. But
I'll be in New York. If you guys are there, hit me up.
We will make it happen. Let us know your opinions on the upcoming draft, and we'd love to give you shout-outs on next week's show and beyond. So thank you so much for bearing with us again this week. It's been a lot of fun. This has been Bix and Kay. Kay's trying to show off his Super Bowl shirt over here. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next time.
Thank you
Have
so
a good
much,
one,
guys.